Let's talk about KCorp. So here's where we'll start. Right, one of the problems I have is obviously people know I like the player upset. But this hasn't been a great year for Upset. But here's where I'm interested to know, as someone who has coached him in 2 different teams, what you think of his issues. Because obviously he's had a couple of carry games that were pretty good. He's had times where he finally, especially with this new roster, actually this new roster looked way better for him, by the way. I'd even say if you watch that one game this week, actually Closer and him paired up pretty decently, actually. It wasn't even too bad. Like, they looked like he could get that bot lane ahead. But the obvious problem I have is this, right? It's not as simple like a fan hopes. This is why I know they have no eye test pro. It's never as simple as like, if Upset does badly, he is bad at League of Legends. Like, it's one of the most slam dunk eye test players ever, guys. Where if you just look at the skills, it's clear this player is really good. But I'll tell you what, Yamato, I will say, as someone who knows him a bit, I do think that his problems aren't even in the game at all. To me, his problems are things like, does he trust his teammates? Does he think that, like, if I go in here, I won't just die and look stupid, and then people will say I died and look stupid, it was my fault? Or should I back off? Maybe actually I don't pull the trigger on this move. The problem I've always had in his case is I've always felt like he is someone where, a bit like that humanoid example, you give him fair play. That's a player I don't like as much. I'll say it, I'll be fair and apply the same logic. I think in the same way, this guy loses trust in his teammates, or if he thinks you can't play up to a certain level, he might be a little bit selfish sometimes. What do you think? Because to me, some of what people see as like him being cowardly or he's playing for KD, I don't think he's playing for KD, but I'll tell you what, this is a player I don't think likes to commit and have insane risk that, like, who knows what's going to happen? Like, are you going to do it? Are you going to help? Are we all going to fight? Where are you at on this play? You've known him throughout the years.
I think, I mentioned him when I listed off like the 3 most like raw talented players that I've ever worked with. Like if maybe I would showcase the votes sometimes. It's like of like how good Upset is actually like in solo queue, in scrims. It's like any pro player that has played against him in bot lane will tell you the same thing. It's like he is a fucking engine. I think that the main thing is the nature of the role is inherently very, very difficult. I think that he is a person that does well with gold, does very well with agency in terms of damage. I think that he was never a strong, like, let's say Ashe player, or like Varus player, like Jhin player. It wasn't really his thing. Like, that worked maybe like in Schalke, but that's because they had like Nuktak and Nuktak, like Prime Nuktak, whatever. I think the main thing that is Upset's challenge is, I think that uncertainty really, really makes him, play worse. I think that when he doesn't know where he has his teammates, he tries to like push his idea of how the game should be played, but he's playing the wrong role for it. If you're playing AD, you have to go with the flow that is presented to you. That's like Kazi is very impressive on this Vitality roster because it has no structure at all, and he is managing to actually generate farm, and he's trying to like Neo in the Matrix. He like fucking makes it work somehow because those Vitality games are chaos. Like, chaos for AD carries is very, very frustrating to deal with. They managed to grab a win on Kai'Sa, and Kai'Sa is the biggest band-aids solve. Like, it basically removes how you need to connect to your ADC in the mid lane and how you pressure the mid wave. And Kai'Sa can always join any fight. Like, she can just catch the wave, she can limp into any fight, and it's all good. She's going to be, participating. Like, that's a good solution because it cuts out all of the points that KC is struggling with. When it comes to Upset, as I mentioned before, it's just when he has uncertainty, I think that this weighs so heavy on him. And I think that stress with how the last couple of splits have gone, I think that it's seeping in as doubt almost. I do believe fully in Upset as a player. I think he's one of the most talented people of all time in terms of just raw game skill. I think that the main thing is just you need to find a way to piece it together, because when I convinced Upset and both to join the team of KC because I wanted to have firepower. Like, I knew that I can change 2 positions and put in 2 positions, and in terms of the names that were given to me, like, these are the 2 players that will allow us, if we piece it together in the long term, actually like compete for a world spot. Anything else that maybe functions better in the short term, like people talking about like putting in Synchro again or something like this, it's like that was something that Casey was already ready to move on from due to how heavy the previous year was when they won the EMEA Masters. Like, I wanted firepower, and I wanted to make sure, like me knowing Upset, that we can create an environment where he has that certainty and he can actually like do well, because Bo and Upset played together and they knew about each other and they understood the changes that they need to make. And I think when that uncertainty seeps in for Upset, I think that he tries to solve everything by working through it. And like when things are going rough for Upset, he's the type of player, like he already plays super much solo queue. And if the team is going bad, he plays even more solo queue to the point where it gets almost destructive, you know? And I think at this point, after going 10th, I think the uncertainty is just so damn fucking heavy. Like, he just needs some reprieve. And that's the blessing here, that they managed to get a win, because at least they can breathe. There's some reprieve there. Because KC has an org in terms of what they've done so far, in terms of where the players are. Like they hired players that are basically like mercenaries. They are playing for their career. Next year, if this doesn't go good, all of them are going to get cut, and then they're going to keep Vladi and rebuild with Kalist, right? So it's like the pressure is very heavy and thick in the air, but that's what you get paid for in the end, right?
It also kills me as well, because the Vladi guy, I can see why they put him in. He's a prospect. Like, he's had some games where he's shown something. My obvious question is this: where was he last split? To me, the second one was the easiest cut of all time, mate. You know what I mean? Like, of all the players in the team, he not only wasn't playing well in those early splits, but he also clearly, like I've never seen a player that was in it, like, as gun shy as him. Like, he just couldn't pull the trigger, mate. It's like I kept saying, it's like he had that thing they say in, like, golf, the yips, where people, they, like, fuck up the putt because, like, something happens to their brain when they're in public. But if people don't know, the premise of that is sometimes in private, they can hit it every time. It's just when the pressure component comes in, it's something short circuits. To me, he was obviously someone who had that. So it's not that, like, the Vladi guy's back. It's like, why didn't we wait until summer to bring him in? Like, I'd have had this guy, again, like I said about GX, I'd have also had him in spring, by the way. So he's getting just more reps. Like, it doesn't matter if the team's bad. We know the team's bad. No one would blame you specifically. Like, start getting your reps in, figure out how you're going to use this guy. Because I agree with you. It's obviously another one of the players. Like, this is obviously the player you're going to pivot, and next year you're going to build this team around. Like, he's clearly the dude, right?
I think the main difficulty, it's like the KC anticipation of joining the LEC was built up for so long. And Sakin, Cabo, Tagamas partially, he was in G2 shortly, but like they stayed with KC so long, and the anticipation for the move from ERL to, of course, the LEC is such a big shift in terms of what your day-to-day is. There's so many things to adjust to, because you are no longer playing in the comfort of your home, comfort of the environments that you are aware of. You don't have the same energy. You need to adjust to so much. And we were a team that started very late due to the fact that there was this Red Bull event that needed to be played with the previous roster, right? So we started very late, later than other teams. And I was very, very clear and upfront about how difficult it will be to adjust. And I knew that the winter split will, in most cases, go bad. Like, we are at the mercy of how everyone else manages with the same issues. And I knew that this will be challenging. Like, for me, always the narrative, like, not the narrative, but the idea was, we're going to, as long as we use our time in winter appropriately and good, the result just doesn't fucking matter. And I think in the case of Sakin, I think that he did well in scrims. I think that he showcased so little on stage, and this was like the pain point. But I think that he really struggled with the adjustment period of adjusting to everything and moving from, you know, an environment where you've performed in, and then refinding yourself in Berlin in a new environment, new teammates. And I think sometimes for some players this takes time. In some cases they snap and they are in that moment and they are there to perform. It comes back to what we mentioned, what we like about Jackie is like, he came in as a player into the LEC and he maintained what he was, and now he's playing in a way that is actively building on that, rather than coming into the LEC and thinking, oh, I need to be a new person and everything that I've ever done in the past no longer matters. You know, never lose yourself when you're moving up a league, because that's what has brought you there in the first place. And I think probably from KC's side, they were thinking, yo, we need to give this more time. We have 4 weeks now to prepare. They are also, the main issue is that the winter split and the spring split, it's not coincided with the ERL, right? It's like you pull out Vladi mid-season, maybe discuss what they're doing in the LFL. And I think that's part of the decision, because I know that KC didn't want to put in Vladi this year even. They wanted to put in Abedage, but the offer that Abedage had, this is what my interpretation is, that he was told, do you want to play LEC this split? Next year you won't be playing, but this split you can. I think that from his point of view, is like, there's a chance I only play 9 games in the LEC when I can play LFL playoffs,
Right.
EMA Masters, have a bigger volume. I think from that perspective, it makes sense because the daunting task is like, you need to be like a caps level player to reshape a team at a degree to really like leave a name for yourself, you know? So I think those are some of the challenges that KC like faced in terms of how they needed to build something up. I sympathize with the whole situation because Saken and Kawa is like, they had such a build up for this KC moment to go, and then the pressure it's so extreme, especially with how like the fandom is, of course.
I think actually a very valid point you make there is I hadn't considered that. I'll draw the analogy, if people don't know, to that year where Grabs coached BDS, and there was that famous thing where they could have had Crown Shot the whole time, and instead he was on the LFL team, if you remember. But then like X-Matty was in the main team, and everyone kept raging like, what the fuck? Are you seeing X-Matty? X-Matty is better than Crown Shot, right? And what they didn't know was, because Grabs couldn't say it at the time until he was fired basically, was his job, he was told actually, was both teams had to try and succeed. So his logic was, well, look, since the main team at the time, if you remember, was like the worst team in the LEC, since the main team's terrible and nothing works, there's no point also tanking the fucking LFL team to bring this guy up and win, like, 2 LEC games. So his logic was like, may as well let that team succeed in the ERL level, and then we'll figure out the main team the next. So I guess you're right. There's some of that as well. People are forgetting that just because you're doing this like LEC thing doesn't mean you just don't care at all about the rest of your organization. Like, you still have to like figure out what you're doing with those other players. Also, you don't, like you're saying, you're also trying to plan further out in some degree as well. So no, I get that point. That's a valid point. What about this though? I do think the one thing everyone's scared to do is, because they've had the odd game that still didn't look great. Like, they've had games where you see they're clearly not going to be a top team. I think people are being way too scared to just say this. It's not just because they won 3 games, guys. This is clearly a way better team than the ones in the past splits, though. Like, if you look at, like, especially with how many teams are really dodgy in the mid-table right now, Yamato, this team, look, I don't think they can make Worlds. That would be ridiculous to me. But, like, this team can be in, like, the 5th to 6th if it performs well. You know, could win a BO3 against, like, a lesser team. Like if you look down at some of those squads that are on the mid-table, if they play one of those teams, it's not impossible they could win a 2-1, you know? So what are your thoughts? What should we expect from this lineup? What would your takeaway be?
I think that they would probably, like, I see them the same way. Like, I think that they would like compete with Vitality and GX for like the mid-table spots. I think that KC was very lucky to pick up 2 wins in the way they did, because one was like off on Nash steal. Probably that game was very winnable, right, against Rogue, and then the steal against Mad Lions. It's like the someone's collapse is going to be someone's victory.
Yes.
I do think
Which,
that,
by the way, is also just fair, guys, because if you saw that winter split, holy fuck did Carmine used to just throw games to the other team. So, like, we're allowed to catch some too, motherfuckers. We spent all year throwing them out. We're allowed to catch a few as well ourselves. You know, just saying.
I think that the main challenge that like Bo and Tagamas, this was a duo that I believed in and I was hoping to work with longer. I think over time you needed to just move on because there was just no way of progressing the game. It's like our big issue in winter was that we had great winning positions. We had fantastic early game. We were probably like one of the best early game together with like Mad Lions in the league in terms of generating leads. We were very, very fucking good. I think in most games we had like winning positions besides maybe against like Fnatic, I remember. And we couldn't get a good fight even if our fucking life depended on it, because we couldn't agree on the areas that were important, and it was very, very choppy in terms of how the communication worked. And this is something that takes time, and over time maybe you can solve it, maybe you can't. And the challenge is, of course, how Tagamas is as a player and Bo is as a player, and this is something we couldn't piece together. With the change up now, I think that especially in the last game that they played, it was very obvious that, you know, with Upset being allowed to play isolated with the static shift Kaiser, then it was very easy for them to just say, yo, jungle and support, we have to right click our mid laner. And they actually had a way of like progressing their actual like mid game. It got dangerous there for a moment because they chose to fight at a time where Ginz wasn't finished, so Kaiser's lead wasn't like interpreted or useful in the fight at all. But they managed to get the catch there on Vitality. I think LEC is in such a state where, especially with the format BO1s are so silly, because even in that game against Vitality, if Photo maybe doesn't make that mistake, or maybe Hilly doesn't get caught as much, all of a sudden it's like such a different game. And it's just the nature of BO1s that like all of these things add up. But I'm hoping to see more from KC, because I'm hoping this 3-4 situation for them allows them to breathe easy, because I do think that they are stiff and they're playing worse than what I believe these players can. So I think the Targama showed good signs, Upset showed good signs, and hopefully they frame this in a way as a very big victory. I think that's the crucial thing. You have to frame this as a massive fucking victory, and you need to use this as a confidence builder, because I don't think that they are performing as good as they can, and I don't think it was the case in the previous weeks either.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.